Hello and welcome back. Today we're talking about data assets. Specifically, we're going to set up data asset to hold all the information related to a character. Stats, properties, all that good stuff. Organized, clean, actually findable when you need it. But before we jump in, a quick thing about this series. Every video is going to tackle one specific aspect of building a game. One technique, one system, one piece of the puzzle. We're not skipping to the fun parts. We're building this thing properly from scratch. So if some episodes feel foundational, that's the point. You gotta lay down the bricks before you build the house. So, data assets. Let's get into it. So, this is what we had last time. We have our character moving in the scene, but we need some stats to go along with it, like the health, speed, stuff like that. And we're going to be using the same data asset to also include the flipbooks for the different animations. So let's create first a data asset. One thing you need to understand with data assets is that they're based on a blueprint, and then off that blueprint you can make multiple of these. Like, consider that blueprint your mold, and then every character can have its own version of that mold. So I like to put them in a folder called data. So right click, new folder, data. And you want to create first your mold, your blueprint base for that data asset. So blueprint class, primary data asset. So PDA for short. Or we're gonna actually this is the blueprint. So B underscore character data asset. Now when you open up character data asset, it looks exactly like any other blueprint. One thing I'm gonna do before we proceed is that personally I don't like to see the grid. And I like that whenever I open up an asset that it docks itself on the top bar. So let's fix that. And you can fix that in the editor preferences. So editor preferences, I'm gonna look for this one, asset editor open location instead of default. I'm gonna change it to main window. So now whenever I open something, it's gonna dock up there. You can see it by, if you wanna open the project settings. Well, currently this is the main, so it's docking to this main. It's fine, same thing. Next, I'm gonna look for grid and I'm gonna remove grid. I just like to work this way. It helps my ADHD, I think. So, what is a data asset? A data asset is a collection of properties. So let's start adding some. So we want to add name, we want to add an image, like an avatar image, HP, stuff like that. So let's start adding variables here. And if this is the first time you're doing this, I want to explain a bit about these. So you have functions, macros, variables, and event dispatchers. And you're going to find these in every blueprint that you ever build. For the time being, we're just going to focus on variables. So let's add a variable called name. And for name, we want to pick the variable type text. And we're selecting the variable type text because text can be localized. So if you ever do a localization for your game, and by localization, I mean changing it to having different languages you can pick from, text is the text variable that you want in order to be localized. So after name, I'm gonna add a new variable and I'm gonna change it to integer and I'm gonna call it HP. We're not gonna set a max HP because the max HP is gonna be in the stats. So that's like the HP it starts with. And next, I'm gonna start adding my flipbooks. But this can get unorganized very quickly. So it's good to kind of like organize your variables into categories. And to do so, all you need to do is click on the variable and come all the way here to category. Now there's some, not in this one, but in usual blueprints, you have a bit of some categories already there for you, but we do want to add a new custom category. And let's call this category general. In general, I'm going to put my name, my HP for now. Okay. Actually, let's put HP in stats. Okay. HP goes under my stats. And you're going to see these in a second. Next, I want to add my flipbooks. So I'm going to add one flipbook first. And then we're going to take this a step further in a second. I want you to first understand this. So let's say this is animation down. And we're going to put it under animation. And we're going to change this to a flipbook. Now that your building block is set up, you can come here under data, right click, look for miscellaneous, and look for data asset. Now, if you ever forget where stuff is, you can just right click and search here for data asset, and you will find it. You don't need to go through all the menus. And when you create a data asset, it's going to ask you, what mold are you basing yourself on? So now we know that we created this character data asset. And let's call it PDA underscore hero. Now you see, they look differently. One is the blueprint, one is whatever the data asset is based on, and the second one is the data asset. They have the same icon, but they have different colors to differentiate them. Every data asset that you're going to add to the engine is going to have this kind of red color. So let's open up Hero and let's see what it holds. So to remember, this is what the base blueprint class looks like. But if I open the data asset, it looks completely different. And that's basically just to hold the information that you need. So let's say here, hero. And one thing, you can set default values for your variables. Let's say most of your characters are going to be 100 HP. None of them is going to be 0. So you can go ahead and set it up here to be default value to 100. Now it's set up to 100. That does not mean you cannot change it, but it's just a default value. So that if, let's say, you forget to change your value, at least it's not 0. Next, the flipbook here is going to be the flipbook of hero walk down. And now you see that we have a collection of properties for your character that if I take it, I can populate my character. And that's what we usually use data assets for. One of the reasons. We're going to be using data assets later on for items, maybe towns, stuff like that. But before we move forward, I want to create a few structs. And I'm going to create a new folder here called Structs. And I'm going to explain what structs are in case you don't know. So a struct is considered a custom variable. A custom variable that holds multiple variables. And then that variable, since it holds multiple ones, you can just use that one variable and it will have all the information inside of it. So let's first create, in the first struct that I want to create is called blueprint structure. And we do say st for struct as a prefix. And let's call it general info. And notice how the categories that we created are here. General, stats, animation. Same thing. Now let's say at some point you want to just like get the general information of a character without having to pass all the different variables. Well, we can kind of combine them into one variable, which is a struct. Let's go back to blueprints, structs, and we created this general info. Now, if we open up general info, this is how a struct looks like. And a struct, you can add as many variables as you want. So let's do the same thing here. Let's say name and put it to text. Add a new one, your avatar. And for avatar, I'm going to look for texture 2D. And for now, I'm going to set it as an object reference. Later on, once we start using it, we're going to change it to a soft reference, and I'm going to explain you the difference. But for now, let's keep it as an object reference. If we go back now to our data, character data asset, we can remove this and then add general info. And now the variable type is going to be the struct we just created, which is st_general_info. And we are going to set it under general. Now, if we open PDA Hero, we have general info, and inside of it, there's name and avatar. You're going to see in a bit why this is useful to put them in a struct. The next struct that I want to do is related to the animation. But all of our characters are going to have either an orientation or an animation state. So the orientation is going to be left, right, top, bottom. And the animation state is going to be something like idle, walk, hit, get hit, stuff like that. You could go like, okay, if it's 0, it's idle. If it's 1, it's walking. But if you're reading the code, it's not very helpful. And you're going to forget about this stuff. So there's a useful variable called enum, for short, but enumeration. And you're going to create multiple of those. And we're going to create multiple of those as we progress. So let's create a new folder here under blueprints. Enum, and let's create our first one. So enum is also like kind of like a struct. You need to create it outside because you need to set up a few things in it. So let's go to blueprint and enum and E for enum, and let's call this orientation. When you open it up, that's also a kind of different setup than anything else we've seen so far. And for orientation, we just want up, down, left, right. So we need 4 entries. So let's add 4 enumerators, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to name these instead of new enumerator 0. So up, down, left, and right. So now we have the enumerator. We need a second one for our animation state. So right click, blueprint, enumerator, E, Anim State. And for now, we're just going to add 2 of them. We're just going to add idle and walk. You can add as many as you want as you progress. It does not mean that when you create it, you need to think about all of them. So that's a good thing. So idle and walk. Perfect. Now, we're going to create a new struct. And I'm going to explain what we're going to do. So we want something that says, if it's this direction, use this flipbook. If it's this direction, use this flipbook. If this direction, use this flipbook. And then all of these, they need to be, if it's idle, use this combination of stuff. If it's walk, use this combination of stuff. So first of all, I'm going to use a struct to create the enum to orientation to flipbook combination. So let's create a new struct. st underscore anim orientation. And I'm gonna add only one variable to it. And it's because what I'm gonna need, I cannot add it as one variable if I don't use a struct. So what we're gonna be using here is something called a map. Now, what is a map? In other software, it might be in other languages, it might be called dictionary. So a map is it has a key and a value. The key is unique, while the value can be the same for all keys, let's say. So our key will be the orientation, and our value would be the flipbook, so that I can look for a specific key, which would be my orientation in that map, and I can retrieve the value, which is the flipbook. So let's call this anim. We can use the same anim orientation. And first of all, you pick the first variable, like the variable pick here is going to be the key. So let's look for orientation. It will all make sense in a bit. Save. And instead of having it as a variable here, so this is the variable type, this is the variable name. And here you can change from single variable to array to set to map. We're going to be seeing them all throughout the course. These are very basic stuff that you're going to use each one of them one day or another. But for this specific reason, we need a map. Once you click on map, it's going to tell you, okay, so what variable type is my my value? So let's look here for Flipbook. And now we have a map that is orientation to Flipbook. Great. And in the default values, I do want to add on my orientation. Notice one thing. Okay, so we used by default, by mistake, the default orientation for Unreal. So we need to change it to our own. Let's rename it so we don't get confused. Anim orientation. So now we can come here and look for anim orientation. Let's go back to default values. And now we're going to add the first one. Now remember, the first one we added was up. Now in a key, I told you that every key has to be unique. So if I try to add a new one, it's going to tell me cannot add a new key to the map where the key at the same value exists. It's because the first one is up. So if I try to add a new one, it's going to try to add up again. So you can leave up for the last one. It doesn't really matter. We can go down, add another one. Well, let's make these left, right, down, and then if I add one up, and now if I try to add, it's gonna tell you I cannot add the same key, and it's fine because we've added them all. Now in PDA Hero, I do want to have like another struct that holds all the animation information, or we can just simply have a map for it. So let's go into character data asset, and we're gonna create another map, and let's call it Anim States. And Anim States is gonna be Anim State for my key, and my value is gonna be the struct we created, which is Anim Orientation. I'm gonna change it to map and look for Anim Orientation, the struct. Now, we do want to also populate it with the default ones. We know we're going to have an idle and a walk. And now if I go back to my, let's remove this animation down and let's move Anim States to animation. Now, if I go back to my PDA, you're going to see that I have animation under which we have Anim States. Open up, we have walk and we have idle. Each of them has left, right, up, down, left, right, down, up. Okay. So this is kind of like ready for me to populate with whatever I want. So let's name here hero. HP is at 100. And now let's populate these. We haven't done the idle yet, so we're going to keep this aside. We're going to say, okay, so hero walk left, hero walk right, hero walk down, and hero walk up. Everything is set up now for us to use. Now, the last thing we need for this setup before we move on into the code is that we need to tell our character that they are going to have in their blueprint a variable of this type. So let's go to JRPG character and let's add a new variable. Let's call it data. And data is going to be of the type we created, which is PDA b underscore character data asset. And now it's waiting for me to give it that data. And since we have created one, you can see that it is here. So if I select it, now this character will have this data asset that I can retrieve information from. Great, so all this setup is done, and now we can move on to the code. We have created a few structs, we have created a data asset, we have created a few enums, and this should be all we need in order to change this to update its orientation. Let's go to our character, and now let's implement the code to update the animation. So I know that if I'm moving on the X value, let's print it so we're sure about it. So print string. When I'm moving on the X value, I know it's going to give me 1. If I move to the right, it's going to give me -1 if I move to the left. So I'm going to be using that information. But also first, I'm going to add a few variables in the character itself. So I'm going to add 2 of them, which are going to be my current and my previous Anim State and Anim Orientation. And you're going to see why. So this is going to be current orientation. And I'm going to look for Anim Orientation. Ctrl D to duplicate. Previous Anim Orientation. Or if you want, you can just say Anim Orientation current and Anim Orientation previous. The next one we're going to be adding are the animation states. So we can duplicate this and change here to Anim State. So this is going to be Anim State current, duplicated Anim State previous. And let's start by organizing this stuff. This is going to be animation. And we can drag onto the category. And now it's all clean under these categories. So Next would be to start implementing the functions. Okay. Let's have a function that, based on these two things, is going to give me my orientation. We could directly do it in move, but I like to have every function have its own purpose. So let's create a new function. Let's say UpdateAnimOrientation, which also takes those two inputs, which are going to be float, x-axis, and another float, y-axis. Now, in our game, we have decided that unless I'm going fully up or fully down, the animation will look like it's either left or right if it's moving. So we're gonna check first if the x-axis is 0. So to check if it's 0, we're gonna go equal to 0. So if it's equals to 0, that means it's now moving left or right. So if it's not moving left or right, we wanna set it to either up or down. And for now, we're just gonna use the current, and I'm gonna explain why we use the previous in a second. So animation orientation current. Before we do that, we need to check another branch. So if it is equals to 0, I'm going to check equal, or just in case, greater than 0. So if it's greater than 0 on the y-axis, that means it's going top. So if it is going top, my animation orientation current is going to be up. And if it is not greater than 0, that means my animation orientation is going to be down. Next, if it's not equals to 0, that means that I'm going either left or right. So same thing. This time I'm going to check if the x-axis is greater than the x-axis is greater than 0, yes. If the x-axis is greater than 0, that means we are going right. And if it's less than 0, that means we're going left. So we can just duplicate these, hook them up, and say right and left. One extra check I want to see is that if it's not going in any direction, do not do anything. So we're going to say if either x-axis or y-axis is greater than 0, it's not equals to 0, sorry. So equal, not equal to 0. Duplicate this. Now, if either of these is true, we want to continue. So, or boolean. This is just to check that we're not doing extra code for no reason. So if x-axis is not equal to 0 or y-axis is not equal to 0, we're going to go ahead and do the code that is here. And let's add update animation orientation. Hook these values in. And now we need something that updates the flipbook that is here. So let's create a new function. Let's call it UpdateFlipbook. And we know we have our orientation current and we have our animation state current. So let's drag both these in. I'm dragging them by pressing Ctrl, because if I drag it with the null, it's gonna give me a set, and if I drag it without anything, it's gonna let me choose between them. So I have my animation orientation and I have my animation state. Where do I get my data from? My data is gonna be like my flipbooks. They're gonna be living on my primary data asset. So let's get our primary data asset. From here, I have access to all the variables that we created and set in this data asset. So I know it's Anim State. And as you see, Anim State has this peculiar node icon. And this is what a map will look like. Now we know that the top level for the animation for the Anim State is the state. And to get all the stuff that are in this current state, what I need to do is use a find. Use a find function to access stuff in a map. So I'm going to look for find. So this is telling me, okay, which one do you want? Do you want the idle? Do you want the walk? Do you want to get hit, etc.? And this is why we have an anim state current. So get me whatever the anim state current is. And just to make sure, let's see, we have it on idle. We don't want it on idle by default for now. Later on, we definitely won't want it to be as idle. Then since we're just doing the walk for now, let's set it to walk. And you know what? Actually, we can do something that if any of these is not equal, we can set the animation state current. Let's move a bit things around to walk. And if it's not moving, you can basically set it to idle. Now, regardless what we have added as a default, these are going to be updated. Let's get back to our flipbook. Now, this struct holds all the orientation to flipbook map. So whenever you have something like this, which is a struct, singular struct, to access all of its data, you can either right-click split or you can break. In this case, we know that we have only one variable in it, so we can just go ahead and split. But just so you know, you can go and break, and you will get access to the same thing. Now, break is good. If you have multiple ones, you can hide the unconnected ones. But in this case, and we will have something like that later on. But in this case, I know we only have one, so we can go ahead and just split. And this is also a map, but it's a map of e-orientation to Flipbook. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to look for find and connect this. Now, this is going to return whatever Flipbook our animation state to animation orientation combo should show up. A good practice would be to just make sure that you don't have anything failing. So you can add a few checks. So see this red variable here, red pin. That means if I did not find the animation state current in this, it's gonna fail. This is gonna tell me if it fails or not. So you can add a branch, which is it's basically Unreal's blueprint version of an if statement. And if it is true, we continue. If it's false, I wanna just add a print string, and I'm gonna append to this. I'm gonna say animation state not found, colon, and I'm gonna drag the enum to it, and it's gonna convert it. So let's say now I have idle, and here there's no idle. It's gonna print me animation state not found, colon, space, idle. We're gonna do the same thing for the second one. Branch, shortcut B for branch, B and then click. And now if it's false, I'm gonna do a print string. And this is gonna be a bit more complex. I'm gonna add a second append. But this we need more than one. So we need anim orientation not found, colon, space. What is the animation that we did not find, which is this? And if we want more information, we can say space for Anim State colon and add another pin and drag this one here. Now I know this does not add anything to you or make it any like flashy or nice, but if you ever have issues and you need to debug, it's good that you have these laying around to see where the problem is. Okay, now that we have our validation checks on, we can move on to updating the flipbook. To update the flipbook, we're gonna drag the sprite here, sprite component. I'm gonna go set flipbook, and we're gonna set it to this. And now, well, it's not gonna happen because I haven't connected it. And now it's gonna call also update flipbook after we update the anim orientation. And I have an issue with the left and right, and I want to see why. Let's see first if we're doing the right one here. So, print string. Let's see. Right. I am going right. So the code is correct. And I'm taking right from here. Let's check our data asset. Right is right and left is left. But it's simply because of how flipbooks are flipped. So for now, we're just gonna change them to walk left and walk right. Now if I play, if I go up, go down, if I go vertical. Amazing. Now we have a character walking in the scene. And the animations are being updated. But as you see, the idle, it's not triggering because we haven't added the idle. So let's go ahead and import the other sprite sheet. Okay, you can do source locations to see where the asset is on your computer. And I'm gonna drag in my hero idle. Now hero idle is exactly as the other ones. It has the up, left, down, and right. So let's do the same thing we did, which is extracting sprite action, extract sprites. And also for these, I know there's 64 by 64, so I'm gonna change it to grid and set the cell width from 128 or whatever that was to 64 to 64 and extract. For this one, we don't have any empty sprites, so let's move them to sprites. And we can filter here by idle. Select these, create flipbook, and this is gonna be FLB underscore hero idle up. This is FLB underscore hero idle left. FLB underscore hero idle down, and FLB underscore hero idle right. Let's save these and let's move these to our flipbook folder. Now these are gonna be weird because the animation rate is at 15. So this is not what we want, so let's change it to something like 4. Or maybe 2. 2 is good. Let's do the same for all of them. Save these. And since we've already added the code for them, I think I added this right by mistake. Okay. And since we've already kind of added the code for when it is idle, we can just go, oops, I closed it. We can just go to our data, PDA Hero, and set the idle ones. We're gonna do the same flip we did for left and right. So left is gonna be idle right. Right is gonna be idle left. Then it's idle down, and idle up. Now, if everything is fine, we should... Okay, so no, our idle is not actually working, and let's see why. Okay, I know why. It's because we did change the animation state, but we didn't do anything with it. So in our update animation orientation, we are changing it to idle, but we're not doing anything. So if it's idle, I also wanted to update to these. And this should... Okay, so it's not. So let's see first if I'm ever setting it to idle. You can add a print string to make sure that the code is reaching here. Idle. Okay, and one thing about it is because, well, this used to work in the old input type with Unreal. The old input type with Unreal used to always send information regardless if you're moving or not. So in this case, we want to set it first to idle, and then whenever we stop, set it back to idle. So on begin play, I want to first of all set it orientation to down, because that's how we're starting, and the state current to idle, and then update Flipbook. So this should give us an idle at the start. And now if I move, the idle is gonna go away. So we need to also, on cancelled and uncompleted, do the same thing. But before we do that, we know that on cancelled and uncompleted, we're gonna set the state to idle and hook this up. So now idle, we move, we stop, and we're in idle phase. Amazing. Now, remember when we have like one last step. Remember when I told you we're adding previous and current? So I'm going to show you something. I'm going to do a print here for every time we're updating this. And we're just going to write update. I know you don't see it, but on every frame, we're updating it. So on every frame, we're changing the flipbook. Now, sometimes for some stuff that are very basic, this is fine. But always think about updating stuff as you go. Optimizing stuff as you go. So before we move here, we're gonna do a check here to see if it ever updated. So first of all, let's add here an output for the function. Let's call it b has updated. without the F. And you can, there's a nifty little node called sequence. If you have like stuff with branches and all of that, instead of reconnecting every output to it, just like, okay, so after you do all of this, do this. So we can say sequence, and then connect the output, and we're gonna add the logic in a second. But why do we need this? In the event graph, we're gonna check, did you update? If you did update state or orientation, do update my flipbook. So branch, connect. So if you ever updated, update my flipbook. And now, since the default is false, nothing is gonna update, which is hilarious. So let's go ahead and check if the previous one was walk. And let's forget about walk and idle. Let's say if the previous one was up, let's check. So let's check animation orientation previous. If it was equal to up, and now it's gonna be up, that means you don't wanna update it. So branch. So if it was equal to up, do not do anything. If it was not, set it to up. And instead of, sorry, my bad, instead of adding the here, I'm gonna add it to every one of these. So if it was already equal to up, I'm gonna set it to has updated to false. If it wasn't up and we change to up, I'm gonna set updated to true. I'm gonna do the same thing for all of these. So let's move things around. So if this was equal to down, do not update. Ah, sorry, my bad, it has to be here. And if it was not equal to down, set it to down and has updated to true. Same for here. If it was not equal to right, sorry, if it was equal to right, set the has updated to false. And if it was equal to right, and not equal, I keep messing this up, change it to right and set the has updated to true. Lastly, the last one, false. If it's not equal to left, set it to left. And if it was, has updated to false. And if it wasn't, has updated to true. Q, by the way, if you have nodes selected, Q to align them. And now, do I still have... Okay, let's put it back again. Print string to has updated. And then you're going to see that we're going to get this only if we change direction. Ah, okay. Sorry. One last step is that if it's not equal, we're gonna set the current one and set the previous so that in the next frame we check for it. So set previous to this instead of having to figure out what that was. So that the next time we go through, animation orientation previous is updated. We don't need to do it here because it's already set up. I deleted this string. Has updated. Now, It triggered only once when I changed. Now it only updates the Flipbook whenever you need to. And it's good to do these stuff early on because, I mean, this could not affect that much. But if you have a lot of these mini performance issues, which are very minimal on their own, they can bulk up to something that could eat up your frame. And in a game, we don't want that. So now we have a character that is idling when we don't walk and switches to an animation state when we're walking. Forget that when he's idling, he doesn't have a staff. Just the sprite sheet that I got. But hey, it's moving, it's looking very cute. And this is exactly what we want in this kind of game. And the nice thing is, let's say we add a cube here. Let's say this is a building. This is a crate. Huge crate. It behaves exactly like a 3D object. Okay, so one issue here is that Unreal Engine has this by default camera collision. You might want it, you might not want it, but if you don't want it, you go into the spring arm and under collision, say do collision test, you turn it off, or you can just simply change the probe size. But let's say if you turn it off, now if I walk, I'm behind this and I can turn around and I can be blocked by it. And it behaves exactly like a 3D character, just with the Flipbook. In the next session, we're going to be discussing about adding more stats because, well, this is an RPG, right? We're going to add more stats and we're going to start with our first UI, which is going to be the health bar on top of the character with the name. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching and see you next time.